She had this way of smiling when she didn't mean it, a tiny tilt of her lips that was more condescending than warm, like she was letting you in on a joke you'd never quite understand. That's how it started with Isabella. Little things. Subtle things. We were only a few months in when I began noticing the shift. At first, everything felt easy, her laugh, her touch, the late-night texts that turned into hours-long calls about nothing and everything. I was 42, grounded, maybe a little too used to being the strong one, the stable one. But she lit something in me. Made me feel younger. Hopeful. Alive. She moved like a flame, unpredictable and beautiful, and I followed her into the fire willingly. But then the flicker started turning cold. Calls stopped being returned right away. Weekend plans became maybe and we'll see. When I asked her what was wrong, she'd kiss me and say, "Nothing, baby. Just tired. Always tired. Always distracted." And yet, her Instagram stories showed her out with friends, laughing in dimly lit lounges, never once mentioning me. The mixed signals became a language of their own, just clear enough to keep me hooked, just vague enough to keep me guessing. One moment she'd say I was the only one who really saw her, and the next, she'd disappear for days without a word. I'd stare at my phone at midnight, rereading old messages, wondering if I was losing my mind or just being played. I told myself she was just scared, that maybe she'd been hurt before, that she needed time. But time passed, and the warmth that once wrapped around us like a blanket started to fray. She'd come over late, always looking like a goddess who belonged somewhere else, somewhere better. She'd run her fingers through my hair, ask me about my day like she cared, and then vanish again before morning, leaving her perfume on the pillow and me questioning whether we were building something, or if I was just standing still while she played her game. One night, after she canceled on me again with some flimsy excuse about needing space, I sat in my car outside her apartment for over an hour. I didn't knock. I didn't text. I just sat there, staring at the light in her living room, wondering who she was laughing with this time. Wondering if she even knew how deeply I cared. But deep down, I already knew the answer. She didn't love me. Not in the way I loved her. Not in the way that makes someone stay. She loved the attention. The pull. The power. And I, like a fool, had given it to her freely, hoping that if I just stayed patient, if I just loved her hard enough, she'd come around. But I was starting to see it clearly now. This wasn't love. It was a performance. And I was just another scene in a show I was no longer sure I wanted to be part of. It was a Thursday night in late October when the weight of it all finally settled on my chest like a stone. I had just gotten home from a long day at work, back-to-back meetings, endless small talk, a client dinner that dragged on longer than necessary. I walked into the apartment, expecting at least a message from her. Nothing. Just silence. Again. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the framed photo we'd taken 3 months ago, her arm around me, her smile radiant, my hand resting protectively on her hip like I believed I had something to hold on to. But I didn't. Not really. That photo captured a version of us that felt more like fiction now than memory. That night, something inside me broke, but not in the way you might expect. It wasn't rage or heartbreak. It was clarity. A quiet, sudden understanding that I'd been standing in a one-sided storm, waiting for someone who had no intention of arriving. The realization didn't come with tears or shouting. It came with a long exhale. I finally admitted to myself, I was being emotionally drained by someone who had no idea how to love me, or worse, didn't care to. I had been giving her everything, my time, my affection, my attention, while she rationed hers like it was some precious commodity. The imbalance wasn't just unfair, it was humiliating. Every unanswered text, every late cancellation, every vague promise of someday had chipped away at my sense of worth. And I had let it happen because I was afraid of letting go of the illusion. But illusions don't love you back. I began thinking about all the small compromises I had made, the moments I'd swallowed my own needs just to keep the peace. I remembered the dinner reservation she never showed up to, the weekend trip I planned that she canceled the night before, the way she used to brush me off with a "don't overthink it" when I told her I was confused. I had tried to make excuses for her, told myself she was busy, that she had walls up, that she just needed time. But it was never about time. It was about effort. And she didn't want to give any. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I just walked around my apartment, touching the parts of our shared history, the coffee mug she liked, the hoodie she always stole, the playlist we made together. Every object, every memory, felt like an echo of someone who had already left, even if her name was still saved in my phone under Bella Dizzy. I knew then that I couldn't keep living in this state of emotional limbo. I wasn't angry at her, not in the volcanic, scream into the void kind of way. I was just tired. Tired of waiting to feel chosen. Tired of constantly questioning if I mattered. Tired of holding space for a woman who only ever gave me breadcrumbs. It wasn't just that she was distant. It was that she knew exactly how to keep me on the hook. A soft touch here. A flirty message after days of silence. A flash of intimacy that made me believe we were building something, only for her to disappear again without explanation. It was emotional manipulation wrapped in charm, and I had mistaken it for passion. That's the cruel thing about hope, it's persistent, even when you shouldn't listen to it. By the time I climbed into bed that night, I had made my decision. No dramatic confrontations. No bitter text messages. I wasn't going to beg her to explain herself or fight to be seen anymore. I didn't want an apology. I wanted peace. I realized I had been asking for the wrong thing all along. I had been asking her to love me better when what I should have been asking was why I was willing to accept so little. The next morning, I called in sick. I needed space, not just from her, but from everything. I brewed a strong cup of coffee, opened my laptop, and started writing. Not to her. Not yet. I wrote to myself first. A letter I didn't know I needed, filled with all the things I had kept buried, about self-respect, about heartbreak that doesn't scream but quietly rots you from the inside, about finally choosing myself. That letter turned into something else later. But in that moment, it was the beginning of the end, and the start of something honest. I wasn't hers anymore. And I wasn't going to keep pretending I was. The apartment was quiet when I got back from my walk that evening. It had rained earlier, and the air still carried that damp, earthy scent that always reminded me of fresh starts. I left the windows open, letting the cool breeze drift through the rooms like a gentle exhale. I stood in the doorway for a moment, looking around, taking it all in. Everything was in its place, too much so, really. The apartment hadn't felt like home in weeks. It felt like a holding place for a story that had already ended. Her jacket was still draped over the back of the dining chair. One of her hair ties was coiled like a forgotten secret on the bathroom sink. There was a half-empty bottle of the expensive Pinot Noir she'd brought over for our movie night the week before, the one she ended up skipping because something urgent came up. It was all still here. But the feeling wasn't. Whatever we had, whatever I thought we had, was gone. I moved slowly, deliberately. I wasn't rushing through this. It deserved weight. It needed intention. I took out the small mahogany box from the drawer in my nightstand. Inside it, nestled in dark velvet, was the ring. I had bought it 6 months ago. Back then, I was still under the impression that love, if nurtured with enough patience and care, would always bloom. I believed in second chances, in time fixing what felt broken. I thought the disconnect between us was just a phase, something we'd laugh about years later when we were older, holding hands on some quiet patio. I saw a future where she finally let me in, let down all those walls she pretended she didn't have. But love only grows where it's watered. And I had been pouring everything I had into a plant that wasn't even rooted in the soil. I sat at the kitchen table and began to write the letter. It wasn't long, and it wasn't bitter. I didn't need to explain every detail of my hurt or list out her transgressions. That wasn't what this was about. This wasn't a performance. It was closure. Just a few pages. Just enough to say everything that needed to be said, and nothing more. I wrote that I had loved her deeply. That I had waited for her to meet me halfway, to show me I mattered beyond the convenience of a Friday night or the occasional display of affection when she needed reassurance. I told her I had come into this with the hope of building something real, something lasting, but hope without action from the other person was like shouting into the wind. I didn't ask her to change. I didn't ask for one final conversation. I didn't ask for anything at all. Because when you finally decide to walk away, real peace comes from not needing to be understood. After signing the letter, I folded it neatly and placed it on the center of the table. I didn't tuck it into an envelope. I wanted her to see it the moment she walked in. Beside it, I placed the ring. No box. No velvet. Just the ring itself, bare, undeniable, and cold against the polished wood. It wasn't a symbol of rejection. It wasn't there to hurt her or to guilt her. It was a symbol of possibility, what we could have been. What she kept at arm's length. What she never fully accepted, even though it had been right there in front of her. I walked through the apartment one last time, running my fingers across the back of the couch where we once curled up watching late-night documentaries. I paused by the hallway mirror and caught a glimpse of myself. I looked calm. Not happy, not sad, just still. It was a different kind of stillness than the one I had been living with, the kind that comes from making peace with the truth. There was no anger, no heartbreak left to fight through. Just a quiet resolve. I didn't need her to open that letter and regret anything. I didn't need her to chase me. That wasn't the point. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my own narrative. About choosing to leave the table when love had stopped being served. Before I left, I turned off all the lights, except for the small lamp on the end table beside the couch. I didn't want her to walk into darkness. I didn't want the goodbye to feel cruel. I just wanted it to be final. I locked the door behind me and dropped the keys into the envelope I had taped to the outside of the door earlier. No need for dramatics. She'd know what it meant. I didn't look back when I walked to the elevator. I didn't pause, didn't hesitate, didn't second guess. That was the part that surprised me most, that leaving didn't hurt the way I thought it would. When you finally understand your worth, walking away isn't a heartbreak. It's a homecoming. And in that moment, I came home to myself. The apartment was quiet when Isabella returned that evening. She was humming softly to herself, tossing her keys on the counter without a second thought, already halfway through texting someone back as she kicked off her heels. The place smelled faintly of cinnamon and her perfume, habitual details that once would have brought a smile to her face. But tonight, something felt different. It took her a few seconds to notice. The light by the couch was on, but the rest of the apartment was dim. There was no sound of the television, no music playing in the background, no comforting clatter from the kitchen. Just silence. That kind of stillness that seeps under the skin and makes you aware of your own heartbeat. She called out my name once, casual and expecting a response, the same way she always did when she came in late. When no answer came, she glanced around, her brow furrowing slightly. That's when she saw it, the letter and the ring. At first, she didn't move. Her body stilled, mid-step, as her eyes locked onto the table. The letter was unfolded, placed neatly. The ring sat next to it like punctuation, final, deliberate, impossible to ignore. Something in her chest shifted. Her stomach sank as if she had been caught mid-lie, though no one was watching. She walked to the table slowly, the kind of movement you make when you already know what's coming but still hope you're wrong. She read the first line and sat down, the weight of the chair creaking under her as if the room itself understood what this moment meant. As her eyes moved across the page, her breath hitched, not because of some grand confession or melodramatic accusation, but because of the simplicity. It was calm. Honest. It wasn't a rant. It wasn't begging. It was the steady voice of someone who had loved her, and finally decided to love himself more. Each word peeled back a truth she had refused to confront, that she had played with the feelings of a man who had only ever shown her sincerity. That her constant pushing and pulling, her silence, her disappearances, the way she weaponized affection, none of it had gone unnoticed. He had seen through it all. And he had chosen to leave anyway. She hadn't expected this. Not really. She thought he would stay. That he would keep waiting, like he always had, standing at the edge of her indifference with a heart still open. She had convinced herself he wouldn't leave. That he couldn't. But now, the apartment, once warm with his presence, felt like a hollow shell. She reached for the ring, her hand trembling slightly. It was heavier than she remembered, though she'd never actually worn it. He had once hinted at proposing, casually, his voice filled with quiet excitement, but she'd laughed it off. "Let's not complicate things," she had said, brushing it aside. She hadn't realized at the time how much that moment had cost him. Now, the ring wasn't a symbol of promise, it was a symbol of everything she'd pushed away. All the potential she'd squandered. All the tenderness she'd met with distance. Her fingers closed around it instinctively, but she already knew it was too late. Her first thought was to call him. Her thumb hovered over his name in her phone. The urge to hear his voice, to explain, to say something, anything, clawed at her. But what would she even say? That she didn't mean to hurt him? That she didn't know what she wanted? That she thought he'd never really leave? None of it felt honest. None of it would change the fact that he had walked away. For the first time, she considered that maybe she had been wrong, not just in how she treated him, but in how she viewed love itself. She had mistaken control for connection. She liked being wanted, being chased. She thrived on knowing someone would endure her chaos, her indecision, her emotional distance. It gave her a sense of power. But it wasn't love. And what he had offered her, patience, consistency, vulnerability, was exactly what she had told herself she didn't need. Only now did she realize how rare it was. And she'd lost it. The memory of his voice echoed in her head, not the angry one, not the wounded one, but the quiet one that used to tell her she was enough. The one that stayed calm even when she disappeared for days. The one that had looked at her like she was art, flawed but beautiful, worthy of devotion. She knew she wouldn't find that again. Not easily. Maybe not ever. She didn't cry. Not yet. But something deeper happened, a crack inside, quiet and permanent. She stood in the middle of the apartment, holding the ring, the letter still open on the table, and she whispered the words she should have said a long time ago. "I'm sorry." But no one was there to hear it. The morning after I left, I woke up to sunlight pouring through unfamiliar windows. The hotel room was small but clean, impersonal in a way that felt strangely comforting. No scent of her shampoo on the pillow, no laughter echoing from the bathroom, no gentle reminder of what I had just walked away from. For the first time in months, my chest didn't feel heavy. I had expected to feel emptier. Instead, I felt lighter, like I had finally set down a burden I didn't realize I'd been carrying. There was no ache, no desperation, only a quiet sense of calm that stretched through my limbs like the first deep breath after surfacing from underwater. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't check for messages. I already knew there would be one, maybe several, but I didn't need to see them. I wasn't curious about what she might say. Because whatever words she'd send would arrive too late. I hadn't walked away in anger or revenge. I had left because I had given every part of myself that I could, and none of it had been enough to move her. I had learned that sometimes love isn't lost in a single betrayal, it erodes slowly, word by word, silence by silence, until all that's left is the echo of what could have been. Over the next few days, I focused on rebuilding the small parts of myself I had neglected. I went for walks without checking the time. I read books I had bought and never touched. I cooked for myself, not just to eat, but to enjoy the act of choosing what I wanted, for no one but me. It wasn't a grand transformation. It was a quiet return to something simpler, something more honest. I began to sleep better. Deeper. No dreams of chasing after something that didn't want to be caught. No restless tossing over words I should have said or moments I should have fought harder for. That part of my life was closed. Not bitterly, not angrily, just completely. And Isabella? I don't know what she did in the days after. I assume she read the letter more than once. Maybe she cried. Maybe she sat on the edge of her bed, holding the ring, wondering if it was truly over. But that wasn't my story anymore. That was hers to live with, hers to process, and hers to carry. You see, healing doesn't always come with grand declarations or perfect closure. Sometimes it arrives in the form of nothing at all, just space. Space to breathe. Space to be alone. Space to stop performing love and finally just feel your way back to yourself. She had her chance to choose me, and she didn't. Not because she couldn't, but because she wouldn't. And I had spent too long hoping her indecision would evolve into clarity. In the end, I was the one who found it. Now, I don't hate her. I don't wish her pain or regret. I just wish her truth. I hope someday she understands the cost of the games she played, not for me, but for herself. Because when you treat love like a toy, you eventually break the very thing you needed most. As for me, I no longer live in the past. The ring stayed behind. The letter spoke for me. And the future, that's mine again. Free of her. Free of waiting. Free, finally, to begin again.